If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you likely know two things. Number one is I have a new book coming out pretty soon, March the 25th, and if you're listening to the podcast, it's already out. And second, that I bring guests on to talk about a big idea, and often their books. Well, today's episode is different because the book that's being talked about is mine, and the questions will be asked by someone else of me. And that special guest is a very special guest. I'll introduce him to you in just a second. Welcome to this very special episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively, make a bigger positive difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. If you are listening to this podcast in the future, you could join us live like there are people doing right now. And to do that, all you need to do is find out when they're happening. And the best way to do that is to join our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn. And when you do that, you'll be hooked up and ready to go, finding out when new episodes are taking place so you can join us. Today's episode is brought to you by my latest book, Flexible Leadership, Navigate Uncertainty and Lead with Confidence. It's time to realize that styles can get in our way and that following our strengths might not always be the best approach. In a world more complex and uncertain than ever, leaders need a new perspective, a new set of tools to create the great results their organizations and team members want and need. That's what Flexible Leadership provides you. You can learn more and order your copy at remarkablepodcast.com/flexible. And with that, I'm going to bring in my guest. Here he is. His name is Jim Huling. And let me tell you a little bit about Jim. First of all, he is an amazing executive coach. He's a globally recognized expert in executive development, over 4 decades of experience helping senior leaders to excel in their roles. As a former CEO of an organization named one of the 25 best companies to work for in America 4 times, he brings a rare blend of real world leadership, ethical integrity, strategic acumen to every client. Author of the #1 Wall Street Journal best-selling book, The 4 Disciplines of Execution, which has been translated into, I think, 16 languages. Because of that, he's helped an awful lot of leaders and organizations achieve their most critical goals. In 2024, he was named LinkedIn's top executive coaching voice, cementing his role as a trusted thought leader. He's done all sorts of other stuff in his life. I'm going to let all of that go past. I'm just going to say this. I want to tell you about his coaching philosophy and then a little bit about why he's here. His coaching philosophy is rooted in enabling the whole person, supporting executives not only to achieve exceptional business results, but also to thrive in their personal and professional lives. And when I decided to do this pair of interviews where we turned the mic around, the first person I thought of was Jim Huling, for a bunch of reasons. And one of them is I'm honored that he wrote the foreword to this book. So he read it before it was really a finished thing. Jim, I am going to hand, so welcome. I'm going to hand the mic off to you, and I'm going to do my best to answer the questions you've got for us.
And this is not a role that you're accustomed to playing, because I have been with you on this podcast many times where you were Obi-Wan Kenobi and I was Luke Skywalker saying, "Please guide me, oh wise one." So I'm really honored to have this role reversal, Kevin, and really honored to be here, and mostly excited about helping to launch what I think is probably going to be the landmark book of 2025 in our country. I mean, all over the world. I think this is that book that can make such a huge difference, that leaders will be buying a copy for everybody that works for them. Organizations will be buying a copy for everybody in the organization, and it will become the favorite birthday, graduation, Christmas gift, for everybody, because what's in here is not just a book about leadership. It's a book about becoming. It's about becoming all that you were born to be. And for many of us who follow you, leadership is the channel through which we use our gifts and make our difference in the world. But we recognize, it's possible to lead in the homeowners association. It's possible to lead in the PTA. It's possible to lead as a parent or a sibling or a friend, So leadership is that beautiful subject that has room and space for all of us to be inside of it. And I hope that's what we bring to everybody today. I have only one question for you, Obi-Wan. Are you really ready, I mean, I've spent like a week getting ready for this moment with these questions. Are you ready?
I am sitting down and I'm buckled in. But let me just say something about what you've already said, because and you haven't even asked a question yet. I wrote in Remarkable Leadership a long time ago something along the lines of, as we become a better leader, we become a better human, and vice versa. And so I appreciate you saying all of the nice things about the book. But and the book is clearly in the context of our leadership role, even though, as you said, leadership is about more than a role. It's a verb more than a noun. But I do appreciate the point that I do think there's mindset stuff here that does apply outside of that actual prescribed role that we might play in an organization, even though that's clearly the context of the book.
Well, in fact, one of the most brilliant things you talk about, and it's my question number 4, so hang on a minute, don't answer it yet, is about, how we choose these roles and these ways of navigating through the role of the label of leadership, and how honestly, not every label fits every leader all the time, but don't get ahead of me, Kevin. Question number 1, I really want to start with, because it's been on my mind since the moment I wrote it in my own notes about a week ago, planning for this session. You kind of open up the book. Of course, the book is about leadership, and it's about becoming a great leader and having the kind of impact that you want. We expect all of that from you, but you can't read this book without realizing there's a message beneath the message, and the message beneath the message for me is choice. In fact, very early in the book, you say, as a human, you have the power of choice, and
it's also the last thing.
It's also the very last thing. That's right. So I would not ask you to necessarily opine on that. But what I think I and everybody else is now going to hold their breath waiting for you to answer is, how did choice become the foundation of flexible leadership? Before we talk about flexible leadership, I want to go to the root for a moment. Something shaped you in your life. Something molded you in a way that you would see choice as being foundational to all the principles that we're about to spend a few minutes talking about today.
Well, I could probably answer that question on a bunch of different levels. I I do think that choice is the thing that separates us from other living things in many ways, right? The ability to choose, the ability to see what's in front of us and then decide what we want to do or don't want to do. The fact that different people can look at exactly the same thing and make different choices. Late in the book, I quote one of my favorite authors, Og Mandino, and say, use wisely your power of choice. And so, I could say it from that perspective, but I can also say that if you think about leadership, I write in the book, and I've written before in the Long Distance Leader with Wayne, that leadership's about outcomes, others, and ourselves. We call it the 3O model: outcomes, others, and ourselves. And so one of those things we have control of, that's ourself. The other two things, which is what leadership's really about ultimately, is outcomes and others, we don't have control of. We can only influence. So if we want to have greater influence on reaching the outcomes that we've set or we've been tasked with achieving, yes, and helping others to reach those and grow in their own for themselves and all that stuff, then if that's an influence role, then then the more intentional we are about how we choose to influence, the more effective we can be.
Mm-hmm. Which ultimately defines not only what your tactical results will be, but also perhaps the legacy that you'll one day live, will all be shaped by the very thing you just gave us a masterclass on right there.
100%. Like, I was just on another podcast that's going to come out in the next couple of weeks, and I don't know that he knew we would end up there, but we ended up at that point about legacy. And I said, he said, well, what should people's leadership legacy be? And I'm like, well, I don't like to live in shoulds for others, but I will tell you that chances are, if you are listening to us or watching us right now, you have a desire to make a difference as a leader, and you have the chance for that legacy to be long, strong, and deep. And I think the things that I write about in this book can help that be longer, stronger, and deeper.
That's right. Well, I love that. I'm reminded off script a moment that in my foreword to your wonderful book, I wrote that this was not just another leadership book, this was a, quote, mentor in print. Because in reading every page of the book, I felt that I was being personally mentored by you. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. I really had a visceral feeling of your voice in my ear as I read every single page. And then I'm so glad everybody else is getting a sense of that as well for what's in this powerful book. And so I want to make a small leap from the subject of choice, foundational idea, but a gentle leap, because not too much further into the book, you said something that literally made me stop. In fact, I had to read it a few times. I had to digest it. I had to metabolize it. I had to ponder it just to really get the depth of what you were offering here. Because you wrote in the book that leadership is not about finding the right answer. It's about finding the best answer, seeking the best answer for each situation. And I want to just quickly contextualize that to say, I have a life's work of leaders coming to me for coaching and insight and sometimes consolation and emotional support, all the things that we all need from our coaches. But often they're coming to find the right answer. And you've given me this new vocabulary of saying, the right answer may not be a precise enough alignment of the question. What we're really looking for is the best answer in each situation. And this is not an idea that is at opposition to consistency. We're not talking about that, right?
Right.
As you so eloquently make the case for in the book. It's not the anti-consistency message, but it is about being flexible enough to look for the thing that is perfect in this moment with these people in this situation. And honestly, Kevin, to me, that embodies the whole message of this book about being a flexible leader. Would you talk for a minute about how do you build this kind of confidence to seek the right answer and seek the best answer, even in the midst of a lot of competing priorities and lots of other influences that every leader faces today?
I appreciate you saying that, and I struggled in the book about about the words right and best and good, and there's some inconsistencies. When I went back to do the narration of it, I'm like, I wish that was a little different. But that line gets at the point that I'm really wanting to make. And here's the thing: the thing is that as most of us in our positional role as leaders have been promoted to this spot or promoted multiple times to this spot because we were really good at stuff. And we were probably expert at some stuff. And so what we got promoted in part, at least, because we were really smart about stuff and because we made the right choice regularly. And so we get into the role thinking, and this is in the back of our head, right? Like, our job is to come up with the right answer. And we went all through school, right answer. 2 + 2 is 4, right? Battle of Hastings, 1066. Like, that's the extra bonus for you today. That's when the Battle of Hastings took place. But the point is that that's in the back of, I think, most of our heads as leaders. And what I'm suggesting is that once you start to consider context of situation, there isn't likely when you and I were first joining the workplace, and we're of roughly the same age. I mean, you're older than me, just saying, but we're of roughly the same age. And when we first joined the workplace, an awful lot of stuff was pretty clear. Like, there was clear cause and effect. If you did this, this was going to happen. And that's how some people came up. And that's a clear context, man. That's easy. We can build a best practice. We can have a process. It's awesome. We can Six Sigma it. We can do all that stuff. That's fantastic. But so much of the world isn't like that. And we're trying to treat it all like that. And we got all this in our head that says that's what we're supposed to do. And that's why I'm trying to make this point that it's not about the right one, like capital R right one. It's about what's the most effective, or what's our best option among maybe several choices in this context. So later in the book, I use the words best and good, right? Like, good is probably good enough. Like, find the one based on the context and go. right? Do that together, and chances are you'll have better success.
I love that. And one of the things you really hammer home beautifully in the book is that the ability to do what you just said so eloquently rests on a foundation of trust. You have to be able to trust that you have the ability, you have the insight, you have the experience, you can assimilate all the factors that are floating in front of you in a collage of considerations, and then say, to the best of my ability, this is what we should do next. But you can't even make those words come out of your mouth if you don't trust yourself enough to say, although I'm imperfect, my experience has qualified me for this moment. I'm going to trust my ability to know what's right, and then choose what's best in the way you just said it.
And you know what? And we're not going to get it all right because we're imperfect, right? But like, we can make. I don't know where I read this recently, and I wish that I would have been the one that said it. Like, a lot of the decisions we make, we act as if they're a tattoo decision. Like, this is going to last a long time decision. When most decisions are more like getting a haircut or deciding what clothes we're going to wear today. Like, we can change them. We can try this time, and we can say to the team next week, hey, you know what? Maybe we could have done it differently. Next time, let's try it a different way. I'm not sure we had quite enough context to figure this out. And what do you think we should try next? So it's not just trusting ourselves, which it is for sure. It's also trusting others.
And if you don't mind me tacking on just to the end of that, then and trusting the ability of our own teams to extend us the grace to not always get it right and to not always know what the right next thing is, but to always be honest and transparent that we are doing our best just as they're doing their best. That by itself, if I had a Christmas list, I would now put on it, Kevin and I have a long discussion about the thing we just said, because we could take an hour for that, but I know that's not the point today. But I want to take that for a moment. So trusting yourself, a strong sense of self-identity, the willingness to move forward and do the very best you can in each situation, choosing what's right for that moment and what's best.
And now I have to stop you there for a second, because that self-identity, because that's actually one of the potentially things that gets in the way of us in this book, right?
Well, that's my next question. That's the next question I want to ask you. Yes. See, I warned you that you would struggle not being the interviewer today. There, you just did it. Everybody's laughing with me. So I've still got the microphone, dear brother. There's a challenging section in the book where you actually confront the tendency we all have to put labels on ourselves, on our roles, on the ways that we do things. And you use all of these examples that are so accepted today. You know your strengths, your profile. So you're an ABCDF, you're whatever that means, or in some methods of assessment, you're the bear or the eagle, or you're blue or you're turquoise. But even the ones that are a little bit more commonly used in senior executive sessions, that you're a servant leader is one that I come across a lot, or I'm a coaching style leader. Well, you confront head on the fact, and these are my words, not necessarily yours, that each of those labels, if we put them on, if we allow the label to identify us, it's a little bit like a straitjacket, because the label might serve us in a moment to give other people a shorthand snapshot of who we really are or how we lead. It might, a label can be a useful thing sometimes, but a label can also be constricting, as though we can't get out of that label. Well, gosh, Kevin, I thought you were a coaching style leader. I thought you were a transformational style. So you give us this idea of sometimes you have to reframe, this are your exact words, you have to reframe your own leadership identity in order to meet the needs of your team. So my question is, would you talk a moment about that? And then the bonus question would be, have you ever had to do that? Have you ever had to reframe you're a nationally known figure, published author, you've got an identity. Have you ever had to reframe it in order to be more effective?
Yeah. So answer the second question, 100%, somewhat regularly. And when you write a book called Flexible Leadership, people are going to start reading it, then there's all the more reason. Like, that's reason enough to write it, because now I'm going to be held accountable. Like, I can be easily convicted here. So by my team, if by no one else. But let's go back to the first part. And people that have been doing the kind of work that you and I do, helping leaders. I mean, we're looking at probably 80, 90 years of doing it in the kinds of ways that most of us would think about as leadership.
Yeah.
And you and I know a lot of the people that have been involved in that over the years. It's a blessing in my life for that to be true. And those are some really, really smart people, right? And they've built these models and they've built these assessments. And we did all of that was done with wonderful intention. And they can be, as you said, Jim, very helpful. The problem is that anytime, see, the reason they're helpful is because as human beings, we are good at pattern recognition. So like if you can give people something like that to hang on to and say, oh yeah, I see me doing that several times. Now that gives me a clue. Like that pattern recognition is helpful. Here's the problem. So you know that I have this strange hobby of collecting tractors, like actual full-size tractors, antiques, most all of them older than me. But I also have a hobby, I suppose, of collecting the toys. I started collecting the toys because they take a lot less space. And my original goal was I wanted a toy for all of the ones of the full size. Now, if I was in my office today, I'd probably go grab one of them. So I could show you a toy tractor. And it's a model of the real tractor.
Wow.
Right? It looks like it. It reminds you of it. It gives you clues about it. It's not the real tractor. Like the model is simplified and is helpful, but it's not the real tractor. And then all of these models, that's exactly what they are. So call it this, call it Myers-Briggs, call it strength, call it whatever it is. Like we're taking a world that's really complex and we're building a model of it so we can literally get our arms around it and see it, which is helpful. But then what people do is they say, okay, well, now they don't just say this is a picture of me, this is me. And so now this is me.
Wow.
And so that not only does it blind me from seeing how else I could lead, it does something more insidious, which is excuses my behavior. Well, that's just the way I lead. Right? So there you go.
I love that.
You had no idea tractors were going to make it into this conversation.
Well, and it wouldn't be a Kevin Eikenberry podcast if we didn't. So now we've checked that box. It's just wonderful. But how beautiful that is. And I feel urged to say really fast, to all the people in the world listening who along with us find great value in assessment tools and the insights they can bring and the shorthand vocabulary that they quickly enable an entire team to have about things that really matter. I think they're incredible. I couldn't do my work without them. And I value the people who use them and invent them and support them.
We have a DISC assessment. Like in our business, we are one of the providers of a DISC assessment. Like I believe in them to a high level, but they're only helpful until they're not.
That's right. And is it fair to stretch that 1 inch further to say perhaps all labels can eventually become a constricting
100%.
mechanism if we
100%.
let them be our whole identity? So
yeah,
what a beautiful thing. Everything I've asked you so far has been warming up for this moment. I've been waiting since we began to ask you this question, like on the edge of my seat, because it's my favorite thing in the whole book. And people who will read the book first, if you have nothing else to do, read the foreword, which I wrote, but I referenced it in the foreword as well. But I want to come to the acorn story, and I come to the acorn section of the book with Dr. Covey's words heavy in my head. Dr. Covey said, leadership is seeing the greatness in others and enabling them to see it in themselves. And if I got one word or two of that wrong, everybody forgive me, but I got the essence of it right. He's so right. If I can see greatness in you and help you to see that greatness in yourself, you and I can do anything from that starting point. Well, you take the metaphor of the acorn to make this same point, but you make it so beautifully, where you make this point about the acorn. All of its potentiality is released from the moment that it's planted. I got chill bumps on my arms remembering when I read that in this book. It was a powerful line. So my question for you, and this really is the Obi-Wan question, is what advice do you have for leaders who are trying to see the acorns, trying to plant the acorns, trying to harvest and grow the acorns, and it's really hard. It's a hard thing to do. And today, it's a harder thing to do today than it was 10 years ago. what advice do you have for, and I need this advice and I'm going to take notes as you answer it, is what do you have for us who are trying to get other people to take that first step in this acorn journey?
Yeah. So the first thing is, I think it is harder, especially if you're leading a team that you're not with all the time, right?
Yes.
Which isn't everybody I know, but is many people at least some of the time,
Mhm.
right? So you have less literal
That's right.
interactions, and even if you're interacting with them on a Zoom call, every day, we all know it's not exactly the same. So that's one of the ways it's harder. It's not the only one, but there's
Mm.
there's noise in the world. And there's lots of other things that people are distracted by, and there's lots of other things that make it hard. But let's go back to like something that people have asked me about or struggled
Mm.
with or sort of used as resistance in a workshop even for the last 30 years. Well, Kevin, you don't got the people I got. Like, this all sounds really good, but I'm talking about Bob over there. Like, a lot of times I'll say at the start of a workshop, like, no one gave this to me in your expectations, but half of you are sitting. The only reason you're in this workshop is you got one you want to fix. Like, if you could tell me how to fix the one, I'd be good. Like, and no one wants to, I mean, some people will kind of smile, some people will duck their head, but like, if you've ever led, you you got one. Right? And so there's the real challenging part. Like, how do I see the acorn in that one?
Mhm.
And we are human, and you may not be able to, but I will say a couple things about that. And number one is who people are not the same as what they do. So the first thing I say to those people is, let's not talk about the person, let's talk about the behavior. What are the behaviors that are the challenges? Because we can coach that, we can talk about that, we can set expectations around that. And I would even go back to the first thing we said, Jim, is that to me the mental shift here is it's not have they ever done it, but do you believe they're capable of doing it? And people have a hard time with that. Well, I've never seen them. That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, do you believe they're capable of it? They would have to make different choices. Maybe there's things that we need to do different in interacting or coaching them. But ultimately, do we believe they're capable? They have the potential to. And if we don't believe that, they should really be working for someone else, because we can never coach them. We are not seeing an acorn there, or we're seeing an acorn sitting on the concrete. Nothing's ever gonna happen. An acorn on the concrete in the desert, I guess the water could still do a little bit, but let's just say the acorn on the concrete is the untapped potential, because how many oak trees are inside of that acorn? If it's on the concrete, not a single one. But if we plant it in the soil and we water it and we tend it and we help it, the number of oak trees inside of that planted acorn are innumerable.
Wow.
That's the difference, right? That's the difference. And so I know it's hard, and I know it can be harder than ever. And I know that you may have someone that even if you've heard what I said, and even if you agree with what I said, you may have a really hard time. Like, I get it, right? And that needs to be the direction that we try to hit.
I think I felt the mic drop. And is it fair if I ask you, you would only do that if you believed in the potential of the acorn? In other words, you would never go to all that trouble to create the
No,
environment or offer the teaching or fertilize and water and sunlight. You would never go to all that trouble. You have to start somewhere with believing in the individual and in their potential in order to make the investment even seem like a rational investment. And then, of course, when you do, everything comes from that.
it takes us back where we started, right? What choice do I make
Yeah.
as a leader? What's foundationally true for me, right? And so the book is laid out as mindset, skill set, habit set. I want everyone to notice that we spent almost the entire time on mindset. And I don't know if that was on purpose by you, but I think it's perfectly perfectly appropriate, because
Mhm.
if the kinds of things that we've been talking about don't resonate for you as a listener,
Mhm.
then, you know, maybe you don't need to buy the book.
Yeah. Or full-time engage in leadership. I don't know. We're not being presumptuous with that, but these are
Right, right,
questions
right.
where everybody gets to ask those questions. I love it. Um, I want to ask you this question, and I feel like we're close on our time. I don't know if we are, but a question that really matters to me, and I've already taken, I don't know, half a page of notes, and I'm going to watch the recording of this. I'm going to watch the recording of my own podcast with you, because you've said so many things I couldn't get them all in my head. But I have not written as many books as you have. I've written 3 books compared to must have
Yeah,
your
but
own
you've sold
shelf
more
in
than
the
I have, so
you
we'll
have
call
to,
it.
well, I don't know. We don't talk about that. But but there's a shelf in every public library that just says Eikenberry on it. It's all the books that Kevin Eikenberry. But I know one thing for sure. I've only written 3, but you've written many. Every time I write a book, every minute in which I'm writing, the book is working on me. So I think I'm writing a book for you, but in some universal way, what's actually happening in addition is the writing of the book is working on me. I'm self-assessing. I'm saying, do I really do this? Do I really are these pretty words, or do I live by these? So I know this is a vulnerable question, but you're a transparent and authentic guy. What has writing this book taught you?
Well, let me start by saying that someone asked me once a long time ago, and it was after one of my first books, Remarkable Leadership, and they said, so what leadership book has had the most impact on you? And I said, the one I wrote. And they looked at me like I was being arrogant. I said, let me be clear. You did not ask what the best one was.
Yes.
You asked what's the one that had the most impact on me. And, you know, uh, writing them is for me, just like leading a workshop. It's convicting. It's aspirational. Like, so, you know, I don't know if I've said this to you, Jim. I have said it to some people, and I think it's in some of the marketing copy for the book, that I believe this is my best work to date.
Oh,
And so it, and I spent a long time, longer than I would have coached someone else to, like, you should have started writing, Kevin. Like, why weren't you writing sooner? But at some level, I think in my procrastination, I was continuing to craft what hopefully is even a better book. So uh, this book has I think the thing that's done the most for me is continued to convict me, hold the mirror up to me. Um, are how well are you doing these things, Kevin? How consistently are you being flexible, if that makes sense? Like, how often are you being intentional about this? Would your team see this mindset stuff coming out in my actions? Um, that's the stuff that I ask. That's the stuff I asked a couple of weeks ago when I was narrating it. I, that was a humbling experience. I mean, it was an interesting experience. I look forward to it. You and I talked about that a while back, because you've done that as well. But just the asking myself as I went, okay, that's good. Are you doing it? That I think is my answer to your question.
no, I
All the
love
time.
that. I'm reminded of this metaphor that a master baker proves the dough before he or she bakes the dough. The dough has to be proven. And maybe I'm stretching those words just a bit, but I think as a metaphor for what you've done, it's perfectly appropriate. That whatever time it took, whatever life experience it took, whatever triumphant and devastating experiences you went through in your journey in order to know the things you know that you could put down in words, I'm thankful that you took the time to prove that dough before you baked it and packaged it and put a cover on it and had a podcast about it, so that all the rest of us could digest it. I think it is, to intentionally use a punning word, it is a remarkable book. I think it may be probably the best leadership book that will come out in 2025 as you and I are recording this thing. And I think I think everybody who's listening to us should run to their book source and get a copy of it as quickly as they can. I plan to give a copy to all the people I know who are leaders. I plan to give a copy to my coaching clients. I think, Kevin, you have done something truly remarkable. And so on behalf of all of us, I get the privilege to say thank you. Thank you for what you did and for what the time you put into it and the words that you crafted. But mostly, thank you for caring enough about us to take all that you had learned, put it down into a wonderfully, beautifully written package so that we could digest it and assimilate it and translate it into how we lead and how we act as people. I am one of millions probably who will say, I am so grateful for you, and I'm grateful that you wrote this book.
Well, Jim, I thank you for that. So what I want to do before we close, I told Jim that I would take the mic back, and so I'm doing that now, and like we would do on any episode. And the first thing I want to do is to say that if you didn't know Jim before now you do. And what you really need to do is make sure that you're connected with him on LinkedIn, which is the best place to be connected with him. It's the place he wants you to be connected with him. If you type in Jim Huling, Huling, in the search bar at LinkedIn, you'll find him. If you're watching, you can see it right here on the screen. There is no one on LinkedIn whose posts I repost or send to someone more than Jim's. He writes every day, and he writes amazingly good stuff. And so, Jim, it's been a pleasure to have you. The question that I have for all of you that are listening is the same question I ask you every single episode, and it's this one. So what are you going to do now? Now, obviously, Jim has said you ought to go buy a book. I'd love for you to go buy a book. I'm going to say a little bit more about that in a second. But the real point of this question is the idea of it doesn't matter what you know, it's only what matters what you do, right? So like, what action will you take as a result of what you heard from us today? And so hopefully whatever that was for you, usually when I'm on the other side of the mic, I've made a list, and sometimes I'll say, hey, maybe you ought to think about this, this, or this. But the reality is whatever matters, whatever stopped you, whatever made you go, whatever you had that thought that in the moment you knew that's what you should take action on, that's what you should take action on. And so whatever those things are, that's the payoff for you in this conversation, is that you are moving on the path to becoming the leader you were born to be because you were here. That's why you came at some level. So I will make a couple of final thoughts. So if you're thinking about buying a book, I'm going to humbly ask you to buy two. And so you can go to Amazon or wherever you buy books and buy two. I'll tell you why to buy two in a sec. But if you go to kevineikenberry.com/buy2, BUY2, there's some really cool bonuses that you get if you do that. I mean, you can get them the other way, but it's way easier to get them this way. Why should you buy two? Because if you're going to walk through some of these ideas, you'll be more successful if you walk with someone else. So buy one and give one to a friend, give one to a colleague, give one to your coach, give one to someone that can walk with you and help you, and you can help them. The value that you will get from the book will rise exponentially from that. If you're thinking about wanting to buy them for a larger organization, you can buy 10, kevineikenberry.com/buy10. If you buy 10, you're going to get a bunch of bonuses, including a discussion guide to lead a book club. If you want to do that, I just finished writing that. That'll be ready by the time you're seeing this, or about listening to this on the podcast. And then if you want to buy larger quantities, you want to talk about having me help your organization in a variety of ways. We have all these other bonuses that you get stacked on the more books you buy. All that is described at kevineikenberry.com/flexible. So listen, everybody, thank you so much for being here. And Jim, I've been looking forward to this ever since you graciously said, yes, you do it, after we had the idea to do it. And so thanks for joining me today and for the time that you invested to prepare for this conversation, and for being my friend.
Yes.
That is it, everybody. If you enjoyed this, invite someone else to listen. If you enjoyed this and now you're deciding you're going to buy a book, then you might have other people want to listen to this or watch this. We'd love to have you do that. And just like always, we'll be back next week. So make sure that you're subscribed wherever you're watching or listening, so that when next week comes around, it'll show up for you automatically, the next episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.